Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I am talking to the wonderful Catherine Pope. We're talking about project managing the PhD, and Catherine introduces us to amazing concepts such as the minimum viable thesis and my own personal favourite, desk hunger. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Emma.
I am so delighted that you're here. Thank you so much for being here. I've already confessed to you that I've been stalking you for a while. And I love the work that you are doing with PhD researchers. And so a really smart book, which I'm sure we're going to talk more about in a minute. Mm-hmm. And so I'm so pleased that you said yes to come and talk and I get to meet you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Emma. It's my pleasure to be here.
So welcome. So first of all, I'm going to ask a question, same as I asked everybody, in terms of just telling us a little bit about your own PhD journey.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk us through a little bit of that?
Yeah, well, I had quite an unconventional journey.
Love that.
So I was obsessed with reading as a child, and particularly the Victorian era. I'd read all the Brontes and George Eliot and everything else, but because of family problems, I couldn't go to university. I went straight into work after I left school, and I always felt a bit grumpy about that, but didn't have the confidence to approach academia until I was 32. And I suddenly thought, I want to go to university. And not only that, I want to be an academic. I want to do this full time. And I was talking to a friend about it. And she said, Catherine, if you do an undergraduate degree and a master's and a PhD, you're going to be 103 by the time you finish. So you need to go straight onto a master's program. And I said, nobody will let me do that. She said, yes, they will. You know so much about the 19th century, so just apply. She was one of those annoyingly confident people.
Love that. We all need one of them in our corner, right?
Exactly. So I applied to Birkbeck and I had to submit an essay and have a couple of interviews. And they were a little bit suspicious. But they said, well, you seem to know your stuff, so let's give this a try. And I went straight on to the master's program. Fantastic. Having not been to university before. And I did it part-time. I was working as a IT manager in my day job. And 2 years later, I got my master's. And then I was completely immersed in the 19th century. And I went on to do a PhD at the University of Sussex. So in the meantime, I'd got married and moved to Brighton. So there have been a lot of changes going on.
Wow.
And then just after my 40th birthday, I emerged with my PhD, which I'd done part-time alongside my IT job. And then I became self-employed and did various jobs alongside my PhD. So I did it in just under 4 years, I think.
Wow, part-time. That's amazing.
Yeah, which is not because I'm bionic. It's just because I'd done so much project management in my day job as an IT manager and a web developer, and I use technology very effectively. And I think that's one of the keys. So that helped me go a bit faster. It wasn't necessarily elegant. There was an awful lot of swearing and eating of cake and crisps along the way. And I pushed myself far too hard and got all sorts of health problems, which we'll probably come to later on. But yes, I did do it in under 4 years. Yeah. And my plan had been to become an academic at the end. I gave up my IT job, did some part-time hourly paid lecturing, and thought, oh, I don't like this. After all that build-up over the years, thinking I want to be the 19th century. And the teaching was wonderful. I loved the teaching so much and the research, but the bureaucracy and the politics in higher education really wasn't for me. But I started running workshops as well with doctoral researchers, and that I love so much. And then I started scampering around the country, running workshops for other universities. I thought, this is great. And I did a coaching qualification and really found my niche then. So I get to play in the world of academia, but also to do all this coaching and training and meet so many wonderful people as well.
Amazing. And now I'm just checking myself, because actually I fell into that. Brilliant. I did that so quickly. And actually, as you say, it comes at a cost. And so I think there's a balance to be had, isn't there, in terms of celebrating the progress that you made with your project, and also recognizing that fast is not always better. So I'm just checking myself with that, really. Yeah, it's well, let's get into it then. Let's get into that right now, because something that a bit that I love in your book, and I'm just going to quote it at you now, is you're writing it about Darwin days, and you're saying 1861 Charles Darwin wrote in a letter, "But I'm very poorly today and very stupid and hate everybody and everything." I love that quote so much. And this sense of that can well happen on many days during a PhD journey, and this sense of how to take care of yourself, how to deal with those Darwin days, and how to keep going. That's the question that I'm putting to you now, in terms of, tell us about how you navigate that and encourage others to navigate that, because I think it's really gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm glad you've picked up on that topic of self-care, Emma, because I probably sound like a ghastly hypocrite based on what I've just told you about my own background, but I'm here as a terrible warning rather than a good example.
Yes.
Now
we teach what we need to learn, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so as I said a moment ago, I was pushing myself way too hard with my PhD, because I was working all week and then sitting at my desk for the whole weekend with a look of grim determination on my face. Right. And that caused all sorts of back problems. I ended up in hospital a couple of times on morphine, which wasn't great for my mental acuity. I also got an autoimmune condition, I think, because I was so exhausted. So I now have a wonky thyroid as well. And I struggled with depression during my PhD as well, because I think I was just under so much pressure. So yes, I did get there quickly, but as you said, it definitely wasn't the best way, and it did have a cost, because it took me a long time to recover afterwards. So that's when I got interested in the idea of self-care and perhaps more sensible ways of going at it.
Tell us what you've learned.
So sometimes we have Darwin days and sometimes Darwin weeks when we're just not feeling it, and we feel really stupid and we hate everybody, as Mr. Darwin said. And it's okay to take a break from your PhD. There's no point in going at it in a frenzy for 7 days a week. If you take a couple of days off, then you're going to be much more energetic and focused when you come back to it. And if you are up against the deadline, I have this concept of Darwin Jobs. So it's these small jobs that are getting you a bit closer towards the finish line, but they're not too mentally taxing. So it can be things like organising your references, printing out some articles, downloading forms, because there are always forms that you have to fill in. And that's just annoying when everything's flowing and you're being creative. But when you are having a Darwin day, you can just throw yourself into those and get them out of the way.
Yes. Oh, that makes so much sense. And it's scheduling for energy, isn't it? And being really honest with yourself as well, just tuning in and not doing that kind of, I must battle on, because as you say, that there's a price to be paid at the end of the battling on. It only gets you so far.
Yeah, you don't want a gold medal for masochism. You want a PhD instead.
Exactly. And as I say, I think what you're there's lots of brilliant stuff in this book, and we'll have the link to it in the show notes. But this sense of kind of keeping going and building routines and building like a support structure to keep you going. Can you tell us a little bit more about, like, give us a sneak peek into what you talk about in the book? Because I love what you said about here's the thing. Let me ask you a question and then just start talking myself. But I love what you said about it in terms of project management, because a PhD, is a project to be managed. And I think that's what your book is so brilliant on, in terms of it's a project to be managed. So now I'm going to let you get a word in edgeways and talk to us about routines.
Okay. I'm glad you picked up on that, Emma, because I think that's the key message of the book, that often we're told to treat our PhD like a job. I don't think that's very helpful advice, especially if you already have a full-time job or you've got caring responsibilities.
Yes.
Yeah, and if you've ever worked in an office, you know that it's not always a model of productivity either.
No.
So I like to treat it much more as a project. You are the project manager, so you've got overall responsibility, and you have other people on your team, and one of those project team members is your supervisor. But they're not responsible for your PhD. They are a resource. You involve them in certain aspects, but you also need professional services staff from your universities, your friends, your colleagues, maybe your family if they're supportive. And for you to really think of this as a project with a deadline and a scope, and not try to do too much. So a concept I use a lot now in workshops is the idea of the minimum viable thesis. So in the business world, there's the minimum viable product, and you get a basic version of your product out there, like a basic iPhone. They don't put all the bells and whistles on. They release it as early as possible to all those people who will queue up overnight at the Apple store and pony up £1,000. And then those people tell them, well, this is what we like and this is what we want. And that's what the examiners do. They are your market. So you're not spending years and years trying to get it perfect. You're producing something that looks a bit like a thesis, submitting it, and then those 2 or 3 people will tell you exactly what you need to do to get it finished. So think about the scope of what you're trying to achieve, and remember that it's an examination. It's not a book. You're not trying to get this perfect. It's like a prototype.
I love that so much. Minimum viable thesis, awesomeness. And I was just talking about that this morning in terms of it may well become a book, won't it? But at that point, you'll get editors involved, and you'll get copy editors and proofreaders, and all of that. That all comes later. And these books that you're reading that come out of people's theses, that's what you're reading. You're reading a product of post submission, editing and development. And a good editor can do wonders with a document. So I love this very, very much in terms of it's a project. What's your minimum viable thesis? And thinking about how you manage that. And you also talked about the systems that you had in place. Can you tell us a little bit about the systems?
So I had some systems in terms of routines. I have a startup routine that gets me into writing. So step 1 might be making a cup of tea. Step 2 might be doing a writing warm-up. Step 3 is obviously switching off the internet, because that's just a giant conspiracy to stop us doing any work. So you have this series of steps that gets you into writing. You're not just approaching it cold. And then you might pick the easiest bit of writing that you've got to do. So you get that quick win, and then you can move into something more challenging. And then I have a shutdown routine where I make some quick notes on what I want to do in the next session. That might be a bullet list, or just capturing some ideas, organizing a few things so I can find them tomorrow, updating a progress chart. And overall, building that routine. Routines can sound a bit boring and monotonous, but they're also predictable in a good way, because we know if we find a good routine, we're going to see results. And I often say, I probably say this in every workshop actually, but if you can write 500 words a day, that adds up to 10,000 words a month. So it's not about these big ambitious goals that we pursue. So I'm definitely going to write 2,000 words this weekend, because there will be so many reasons why that doesn't happen. Somebody will thwart you. But if you can say, I'm doing this full time, I'm going to aim for 500 words a day, that can be manageable depending on which stage you're at. So set small goals and achieve them consistently.
And again, there's so much good stuff in there. There's again this sense of the routine, and this sense of having something that is, again, it's this sort of self-care, isn't it? Something that is looking after yourself in that. Cup of tea always a strong way to begin, but this sense of attending to what you're going to need in that space, rather than marching yourself to a desk, sitting yourself down and forcing yourself. Coax yourself, yourself, which I love, and looking after yourself in picking up on what you said about the setting up for the next day, because I think getting started is always tricky, and if you've done some work, like you say, ahead of time, to get yourself back into it the next day. I love that. And thinking about what people can do to develop their own, because everyone will have that kind of unique thing, won't they?
Definitely, yeah. Very few of us can be trusted to just get on with something difficult on our own. We have to introduce these structures. And if we do get into writing and it's going well, it can be hard to stop. It sounds like a nice problem to have, but then we push ourselves too hard and we sit there, our back seizes up, and then we get tired and bad-tempered, and we produce some terrible writing, and then our future self has got to try and edit that. So set some limits. If you say, I'm going to write 500 words today, or I'm going to write this tricky paragraph, when you've completed that, stop and have some moderate fun, and then come back and pursue your next target tomorrow.
Oh, I love that, of thinking about being kind to your future self.
Yeah.
Is this useful to my future self? That's a brilliant question.
Or am I going to be fuming with my past self tomorrow?
Oh, we have all been there.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I love that. I really love that. Anything else before I kind of pin you down for the top tip at the end? But is there anything else that you wanted to say about what you discovered in terms of routines and systems and managing the project?
So I think this builds on something you said a moment ago, Emma, about recognizing when you're at your most energetic or creative. So not trying to write in the evening if you're more of a morning person. And I have this idea of my golden hour where I'm most productive. So I have 2 golden hours between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. So that's when I'm able to write, and I protect those 2 hours every morning.
Amazing.
I use this tool called Focusmate. I don't know if you've come across it.
Yes, I have. And I'll put the link to that in the show notes as well, because it's brilliant. Tell us a bit about how you use that.
Yeah, so with Focusmate, you can book these online writing sessions with a stranger. It sounds a bit creepy, so a stranger watches you write, but it creates accountability. You've made this firm commitment to someone else. It's in your calendar. And then at the beginning of the session, you have a brief chat about what you're hoping to achieve for maybe a minute or less. Then you both work in silence for 50 minutes. You mute your microphone, but you keep your video on. And then at the end of the 50 minutes, you have another very brief chat to share how you got on. So you're going to be really embarrassed if you say, well, I spent all the time on Twitter. It's obviously they can't see your screen, but there's always that sense that they will somehow know.
Yes.
So you can book these sessions for weeks or months in advance. So I have those booked every morning. I have 2 Focusmate sessions. So I'm perched at my desk at 8 a.m. and I do those 2 hours of writing. I've been doing that since early last year, I think. I don't get much time to do writing otherwise. But it helps me keep on top of my projects, and that's when I find it easiest to write. I can be very productive. If I try to write in the afternoon, I'm usually in a bit of a slump then, and I can write, but it's squeezing out occasional words. So understand when's a good time for you. It's definitely not about trying to write for a whole day, because I don't think anybody can do that.
No,
it's quality of those hours, not quantity. 2 hours of really focused writing every day, I think would be enough to keep you on track with your PhD if you're doing it full time.
Because as you say, there's all those other things to be getting on with as well. There's lots of other tasks around it, and that will fill up your time. And like you said already, the blend of it will change depending on what phase you're in. But absolutely, this sense of the quality of it. it doesn't, because I think often people think, well, if I sit at my desk for 8 hours, it will make a difference, and it might just make you really miserable. And actually, you could have got other things done in that time.
Yeah, and you just associate being at your desk with feeling really frustrated.
Yeah.
But I can't remember which author said this. It was in a Guardian interview a couple of years ago, but he said you need to create desk hunger, that you leave your desk before you feel like you've said everything, because then you're thinking, I really want to get back there tomorrow and do some more writing, rather than thinking, oh, I'm an empty husk now. I just want to get away from this wretched thesis. Yeah,
desk hunger.
Desk
I love
hunger.
that so much. I love that so much. This is brilliant. Brilliant stuff. But I'm aware of time, because there are many more questions I want to ask you, but you have to come back another time. But at this point, I just want to ask if you have, out of all that you've given us, you've already given us a load, so you might want to just repeat one. But do you have a top tip to share in terms of this project management for the PhD?
Yeah, I think the most important concept is the minimum viable thesis. Don't try to do too much. And as you were saying, Emma, don't compare it to a published book where the author has been through it many, many times and it's had the attention of proofreaders and copy editors and everything else, because your thesis isn't a book. It might be in future, but then you have to do a lot more work to it. For now, it's an examination, and you just need to convince those 2 or 3 people that you are a researcher who's got an original and significant idea. And it's not about producing something that's perfect.
I love that. So let that sit for a minute. Take that on. Catherine, thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for putting that into a book so we can all share it. We'll have your contact details on the show notes, because I'm sure people want to find out more about you now. Thank you so much for being with us. And don't forget, everyone, that you can sign up as well for notes from the Life Raft. The details for that will be on the show notes too. And this is just a weekly email with top tips and information to help you on your PhD journey. Thanks so much, Catherine, for your time today.
My pleasure, Emma. Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you all for listening.